As you perhaps already know, I've done 2 videos on this subject. Why a third? Well, just to get the timeline right. Friday the 13th of September, that fateful Friday the 13th, Pope Francis in Singapore says that all religions are roads to God. Well, that's an atomic explosion if ever there was one. The result is not just turmoil within the Catholic Church, but more pointedly for my purpose, because I've addressed Francis in a lengthy video on this particular point. But turmoil amongst YouTube Christian apologists. Not all of them, of course. Many of them are anti-Catholic anyway. But here we have 2, Sam Shamoon and Christian Prince. Christian Prince reacted to this video, to this report of what the Pope had said. Reacted in a hostile way. He's not the Pope. He's a fake Pope. Actually, that would be a sedevacantist position anyway, but you know. Now, Sam Shamoon came out with his own video about this, much more nuanced. And you know, Christian Prince is a great apologist for Christianity against Islam. And Sam Shamoon is a great apologist all round. But the thing about all of us, we have our own personalities. And Christian Prince you might describe as irascible. You might say he doesn't pull punches, doesn't mince his words. Now all of us are taught to have certain social graces. After all, you can't get on in life. You'd be in fights all the time if you just spoke your mind. But perhaps because of his character, Christian Prince has been able to go at Islam day after day, year after year, perhaps decade after decade, without being exhausted mentally. But the flip side of that may be that his way of expressing himself, and of course that English is not his first language, and one of the great things about him is that he's a native Arabic speaker, is that he is not nuanced, he's blunt. And that can wind people up. And I think it wound up Sam Shamoon. And Sam Shamoon, again, with all his great gifts, he's not part of the diplomatic corps of the United States government. And so it was the scene was set for a, head-to-head. And that's what's happened. And my plea was that they'd get together, or somebody would mediate between them, and peace would break out. And partly why I was relaxed at this point, and I did my video, today it's the 21st of September 2024. My videos that came out yesterday, the 20th of September, Friday the 20th of September, were actually produced on the previous day, the 19th of September, Thursday the 19th. So there's been water flowing under the bridge since then. But the reason I was in a fairly relaxed mode was because, we Catholics, if you're not a Catholic, we have to respect our Pope. Even if he kind of says things which are just outrageous, even if he does things which we're not happy with. There's a picture going around of Pope John Paul II kissing the Quran. Well, I wasn't happy about that. Actually, there's a good one going around of some patriarch of the Eastern Orthodoxy kissing the Quran. So it's not just us. But whereas, with us, we'd say, well, okay, he should have done that, but we speak respectfully of him. Why? Because he's Pope. Why? Why does that matter? Because the papacy, we Catholics believe, was established by Jesus Christ, making St. Peter the first Pope 2,000 years ago. And we have now an unbroken line of succession from Peter to Francis. That makes our church the oldest continuous institution on earth. That's important to soak in. We don't have big armies. The best we had was the defenders of the Papal States, and they weren't up to much. Papal States are long gone. But we've survived nonetheless. Anyway, that's a separate point as to whether divine intervention is involved in that. I believe it is. But with Christian Prince, he's not a respecter of the papacy. He's a Protestant. We can't expect him to speak respectfully of us. He simply sees a man dressed in white, head of a denomination, as he would see it. Maybe an old denomination, but just a denomination, who's saying things which are completely contrary to the gospel, as he says, as he would say, and as I would say. So he's not going to pull his punches. Why should he? So when he doesn't pull his punches, I'm relaxed about that, because I know where the man is coming from. If a Catholic were to talk like that, I'd have issues, because that would suggest he's not properly understanding the office that the person's holding about whom he's speaking. An secular example. I was born a British subject. Now we're called British citizens. That's just some kind of French revolutionary thing. I'm a British subject. My liege, I'll use that antiquated term to make a point. My liege is King Charles. Now, people say, even British people do this, and people who are traditional, you might call them right-wing British people, do what I think is wrong. They say Charles is woke, perhaps he is, and then he may say things that are just, unfortunate. Yeah, but one must always, as a British person, a patriotic person, say, yes, I'm not happy with what our liege has done, but he is our king. Because otherwise we fall into the hands of enemies of Britain. And most enemies of Britain are internal enemies of Britain. And most of the enemies of Britain are not Muslims living in Britain. Make no mistake, one wants to find the principal cause of our problems, the principal causes of our problems. One doesn't look principally first at Muslims. One must start getting a clear picture about that. I won't go into that. Partly if I went into that, my channel would be chopped. But it's another subject anyway. So we have to understand, if we really are concerned about where Britain's going, that the king is the ultimate authority in our land, because he's, by virtue of that ceremony where he's anointed with the holy oil, which although it was a Protestant ceremony that of anointing, it was actually a Catholic ceremony. 90% of that whole procedure which made Charles officially the king is a Catholic ceremonial. And that Catholic ceremonial is to replicate the anointing of King David. Listen to Zadok the priest and it's wonderful music about the kind of holiness of the office of king, a Christian king in a Christian kingdom. To have a kingdom that you say is Christian without a Christian king is difficult to imagine. But that's not the point, isn't it? I'm wondering, I know that, but I want to get that little bit off my chest. Maybe I'll do a dedicated video at some point about Christian kings, the Christian civilization of princes and pope, the lords, the realm of the spiritual and the realm of the secular, and they must always work together. That's the great medieval setting. That's the great medieval civilization. The two swords, the doctrine of the two swords, which Christ told to be taken to the Garden of Gethsemane in Scripture. The sword of holiness, the sword of the spiritual realm, the sword of the secular realm, never to be disunited, never to be merged in the Byzantine way of what's called Caesaropapism, but actually to be acting as one. That is not to be merged in the way you might get a heretical sect would say the divine and human natures of Christ were merged, but to bring them together in the way that the person of Christ is composed of a divine nature and a human nature, joined but not intermingled, just joined in perfect harmony. That's the Christian depiction of ideal civilization. So we must respect our king, but an outsider, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, why should they respect the king? Even if they're in Britain, even if they have British citizenship, they don't have the same loyalty to the monarchy because it's a Christian monarchy. They don't have the same ideology. Just call it an ideology if it wants. Never mind faith. But we must understand when they critique us, they're critiquing from the outside, and we shouldn't get too upset about that. So that's the business with kings, but we on the inside must know the distinction. And so with the Pope. Christian Prince is on the outside. We must understand that and not be too hard on him over that. And that was the spirit in which I produced my videos, which I uploaded, and hopefully some of you watched yesterday, Friday the 20th of September 2024. So why a video today? Well, as I said just now, water has flowed under the bridge. And yesterday, somebody commenting on one of my videos said that Christian Prince has gone too far now. He's calling the Pope Mohammed. I thought that's interesting. Actually, I kind of laughed to myself because, again, he's an outsider. He can call the Pope what he likes, really, on the basis of what he's unhappy with the Pope having said. Didn't bother me too much. But nonetheless, I was alerted by the helpful chap who gave me the heads up that Christian Prince was live streaming. So I went on, I caught pretty much the last half hour or so of it. And I noted, by the way, in the chat, alongside the live stream, some Catholics were trying to make points criticising Christian Prince and what he was saying, but the majority of the chat seemed to be anti-Catholic, and some of it, really, really very anti-Catholic. I thought this is like attracting the worst sort of born-again Christian now. And Christian Prince has said previously he always kicks out people who are anti-Catholic. And that is very important to do that if you're going to be a Catholic follower of this man, because otherwise it will attract the nastiness, which was evident there yesterday. But that's the chat. What about what Christian Prince himself was saying? Well, I tuned in when he was looking at pictures on the internet of the Blessed Mother. Perhaps the worst time for me to tune in. Because it's one thing to say, well, we think Mary is the mother of Jesus, to be respected, and that's it, and that's a full stop, and they really don't go on beyond that. But if, as most born-again Christians I encounter do, go beyond that to say, you Catholics are worshipping her as an idol. Now, don't think Christian Prince said we worship her, but he talks about the statues. Well, first he talks about the holy pictures. The pictures of Mary. Oh, look, she's blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Well, if you watch videos on my channel, you'll know that I'm a great proponent of Maria Valtorta, an Italian mystic who died in 1961, who had a complete, comprehensive revelation of the entire gospel. That is, everything that's in the New Testament. I think 98.5% of what is written in the Gospels is in her writings, but in amplified form, expanded form, in such detail that scientists have been able to extract data from those writings to establish that actually there's information in there which she could not have known. But the point here, in mentioning this, is not so much to talk about Maria Valtorta, but to say that she depicts Mary as blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and Jesus as blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And you might say, that's it then. I mean, I've got the particular video where there's a description of Mary on one of my, on my channel somewhere. And people have said, that can't be Mary, that's just, Europeans doing what they do. Well, actually, first I'd say it is quite proper for Europeans to depict in the great art of Europe Mary and the saints and Christ as they themselves, Europeans, look. Just as it's proper for people in Africa to do the same, or Arabs to do the same, or the Inuit to do the same, or Chinese people to do the same. This is quite proper. Europeans would be in a very, very bad state if they felt guilty about doing that. But of course, in the great days of Catholic Europe, they never feel guilty about that. And no way anybody should. But the question is, though, it's a valid question. Well, no, before I get to this valid question. So you don't criticise depictions of Mary as blonde-haired and blue-eyed, even if you don't accept what I believe in, the visions of Maria Valtorta, which I believe in for very strong objective reasons to do with the science. But if you just say, okay, you don't get a depiction of how people looked in the Bible, pretty much. Don't get it. In the New Testament, for our characters, you don't get it. There's no time to write all that stuff. It's almost frivolous. But nonetheless, you don't trash the art. You don't say, this isn't Mary, that she didn't look like this, just because this is from the Middle East. Do you think that in the Middle East there weren't blue-eyed and blonde-haired people? There's no reason genetically to say that was not possible. It may have been rare, and I think, again, reading the writings of Maria Valtorta, it is rare. It is rare, from the vast numbers of characters she depicts. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. And there's reason to believe it's possible, and I go into that in other videos that I've done. But put that to one side. You know, you can depict Mary respectfully with any racial appearance. What Christian Prince was doing was poo-pooing these depictions because she was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and also talking as if we see them all as Mary. And then he went on to talk about kissing the statues, or kissing the paintings perhaps, kissing the statues. These are idols, it's idol worship. Well, and he went on at some length about this. And the entire tone, I think it was shocking to people in the chat, Catholics in the chat, it was shocking. And it was getting the worst aspects of Protestantism going as well. So this is a new thing that had not come out before. I've watched his videos over years, several years. And I've never picked that up before. I picked up him occasionally saying, well, you know, the priest, you don't need a priest, you know, you don't need the Pope. But he never says it he doesn't spend time on it, he just says it in passing. Because the basic things, you've got Jesus, the Bible, that's it. And I find he's a Protestant, but no problem. We can discuss these things in a different way to establish why we believe what we believe and why we think the Bible alone is not only erroneous but illogical. But that's for another day, another forum. He's just talking in passing from his perspective, no problem. But yesterday, Friday the 20th of September, he was being at best disrespectful and at worst, well, we could say sacrilegious and blasphemous from our perspective. And I guess that's because it's a new thing, I have to make a new video. And what it really is a matter of, oh, and he also said, and this is a doctrinal point, he says, Mary's the mother of Jesus, we respect Mary. Mary's not the mother of God. And Protestants say this all the time. Mary's not the mother of God. And they say it in the sense that we Catholics are just elevating her now to the absolute heights. Say that she's the mother of God. And it's as if the Protestants have the same misunderstanding about this as Muslims. Now I read some calling Christian Prince a Nestorian for rejecting this, but I don't think he actually understands what's going on here, what the title Mother of God is about, just as most Protestants don't. I don't think he knows about the Council of Ephesus of 431, the great battle with the Nestorians. Nestorius was a Catholic priest, so you may as well criticise that as well, right? We produce the bad uns. We don't produce the good uns, but we produce the bad uns as well. Nestorius said there are two persons in Christ. There's the divine being and then there's the human being. This is condemned. And so Mary is the Christokos, the bearer of Christ. The human part, I'll put it that way. She's not the Theotokos, the God-bearer. But the Catholics and the Council of Ephesus determined, as had been the constant Catholic faith forever, that Jesus is one person. Jesus is one person. I'm going to put this. One person, there, two natures, divine nature, human nature, but one person possessing those natures. Not mixing, as I said at the beginning, not mixing, but united. So if Mary conceives our Lord in her womb and she carries him for 9 months, she's carrying God in her womb, not just the human bit, if I can use colloquialisms or basic language. She's carrying the entire Christ. So she's bearing God in her womb. So she is the mother of God. And in fact, Saint Anne is the grandmother of God. And Saint Joachim is the grandfather of God. Now, when you hear Anne and Joachim, if you're a Protestant, you won't. It is non-biblical stuff. This is their sacred tradition. But yes, we can speak of the grandmother and the grandmother of God. But Mary is the mother of God, and that title is given in the context of that great controversy with another major heresy, the heresy of Nestorianism. But as I say, I don't think Christian Prince, when he said she's not the mother of God, was thinking along those lines. And I would hope that he would look into these things. I think, he's got a great depth of knowledge about Islam. And like all of us, if we specialise, we're neglecting other things. We can't help it. Life's short. And I think it just would be good if he sat down with a person he trusts and respects to talk about early Christianity. And especially as he's kind of like in this unfortunate situation with Sam Shamoun now, that he talks to somebody specifically about Catholicism. So I don't condemn him. I don't condemn him for talking about saying, don't kiss Mary, or that's not the mother of God, or this isn't Mary, she's got blonde hair and blue. I don't condemn him for that. I still bless the man. I still respect the man. I still love the man. And why would I love him? I don't know him. Because he's done such work in bringing people out of darkness. The darkness of Islamism. As to use the phrase, the darkness of Islamism. It's one of our prayers from the 19th century. Bringing him out of the darkness of Islamism. Just bringing them out of that and into just natural light. That's the starting point. Then he seeks to bring them from there. That's a great thing already. But he seeks to bring them in there to his understanding of Christianity. And you might say as a Catholic, well, yeah, he's bringing them into heresy. Well, objectively speaking, yes. But think about this. The particular heresy he holds, Protestantism, is 90% Catholicism. If you bring somebody from Islamism, which is complete pitch black, well, not complete pitch black, because they did receive some lights from Christianity, but it's near pitch black, and you bring them into 90% Catholicism, you've done a great thing, because nobody has got the entire Catholic faith down pat. So even Catholics can bring people to an even slightly incorrect understanding of Catholicism. And Jesus notes that there are people who love him all over the world who will do their best with what they've got to bring people to Christ. In Tristan da Cunha, Fletcher Christian, played by Mel Gibson in the 80s, played by Marlon Brando in the 1960s, played by who was it? Gone with the Wind. Clark Gable in the 1930s, when it was Charles Lawton who was Captain Bligh in the 1930s production. It was Trevor Howard who was Captain Bligh in the 1960s production with Brando, and it was Anthony Hopkins who was Captain Bligh in the 1980s production with Mel Gibson. Why did I say this? I just had to get that out of my head so it didn't float away. These great movies about this great story, but you see, the point is, Fletcher Christian in the end died. These men who escaped the bounty to go to live with these Tahitian women, they fought amongst themselves. There was one man left in the end. He was a drunk from England, a ne'er-do-well. Whether he was press ganged into the British Navy, I don't know. But they end up on this island. I don't know whether it's Tristan da Cunha itself, where they ended up in the end, because there were a few different islands, and I think they had to get away from the Royal Navy that was hunting them down, because they were mutineers, and that will be it. God bless the British Empire and the Royal Navy. So in the end, there's this one man left, and there's a bunch of women. He knows nothing of Christianity. God enlightens him about what Christianity is about. He reads the Bible. He teaches Christianity to these Polynesian women and to the children of these Polynesian women whom they'd had by these various English sailors and by Fletcher Christian himself. And their descendants are still there today. But this man, he didn't have the Catholic faith, but God reached those Polynesians, as well as him, with the gospel within the limitations of that man. So this is what God does. He will reach into the darkness of Islam using the great weapon known as Christian Prince. And who am I as a Roman Catholic? A member of the one true church. Who am I to say, oh, he's a dog, he's vile, he's a heretic, he's a blasphemer, and so on. We can speak that somebody's objectively X, Y, Z, but there's no need to go into that. We can address that and hope that God will work in their souls. So that's my view of Christian Prince, as at today, because it's maybe a fast-moving situation, who knows. So today, Saturday, the 21st of September, 2024. What then's the practical upshot of all this? Still, why might I make a video? I'm just giving you my thoughts. Is that all I'm about? No. Here's my point. As at this moment, I don't know whether it will change. I don't know whether it will get worse. I don't know whether it will get better. I don't know whether Christian Prince has actually changed now and he's become more anti-Catholic, or whether he was always like this but masked it and was subtly trying to bring people out of Catholicism by dropping these references to not needing a priest, not needing a pope. Don't know, don't care. What matters is as at now, as at today. It would seem to me not appropriate for Catholics to patronise Christian Prince, not to consume his output. It's a shame, and I hope it changes. I really do. I hope that which I requested, and I still request, in my videos that were uploaded yesterday, I request that God touches the heart of Christian Prince and those around him, and Sam Shamoun, that there be a reconciliation. Because one can work in separate spheres. Imagine. Now, you know me, I'm more severe than Sam Shamoun. He talks about, and William Albright, this is all about the apostolic churches. Yeah, they're apostolic churches, all right, that's true. But they're in schism, sometimes in heresy. There's one church, the one holy Catholic church under the Pope, outside of which there's no salvation. Extra ecclesiam nulla salus. I explain that in my lengthy video. It doesn't mean if you are a Protestant today, you're going to hell. If you're Eastern Orthodox today, you're going to hell. I believe that God will bring these non-Catholics into the Catholic Church, even at the last moment of life. And I quoted St. Faustina as support for that. But the mercy of God is support too. But you see, I'm more hardline than William Albrecht, who's a cradle Catholic like me, or Sam Shamoun. But nonetheless, I still say we must be as sober, as loving, as dialing it down as much as possible with those who aren't of our persuasion, but are men of goodwill, and they might be getting things wrong right now, like Christian Prince I think went too far yesterday, and too dismissive, too critical, too just bad-mouthing our statues, our holy pictures, our depictions of Mary, and so on. But that doesn't necessarily come from a bad place. It doesn't necessarily. As I said before, Sam Shamoun was in the same place, probably even nastier about us. But now he loves Mary, cries about Mary. So you see, we mustn't say that he was evil then, though. He was following the truth as he understood it. So imagine me then, this absolute extreme Catholic. Now I know there are more extreme than me, but because I'm an extreme Catholic, particularly in this post-1960s kind of Catholic church. Know what I mean? Say I was an expert in Buddhism. That I knew it inside out. That I could actually read the original Buddhist writings in those original languages, so I could get around any dodgy translations they make, like Christian Prince can with the Arabic of the Muslim writings. You people who see me as an extremist Catholic, who are born-again Christians, Protestants, whatever, you could actually watch my videos 24/7. If I'm just talking about that, maybe I'd briefly mention something about Protestantism, but briefly and en passant. You can still watch my stuff. But as soon as I went off that and started attacking your Protestant faith, you quite rightly say, hey, whoa, careful with this guy. And this is my point. For Catholics, I said this so Protestants can understand where I'm coming from here. And we're all friends. I don't wish you any ill will. I might argue with you till the cows come home. But I wish you all well. You know how it is, if you start trashing my beliefs, I'll just respond in a more robust way. It's just life. I do that in Hyde Park all the time. It's life. We're human. I'm supposed to be firm where firmness is needed, be soft where softness is appropriate. The Catholic Church is composed not of 1.3 billion people who know their faith. About three people know their faith. That's an exaggeration. But you know, we can say a good billion of those easily don't know their faith. And that's being generous to the church. The numbers that know the faith are probably negligible. In fact, it's the same with Muslims. That's why I kind of... most Muslims, by the way, folks, are not Muslims. They're not. That's why we must always say, when they say, how dare you attack Muhammad, and I'm going to get you if you attack Muhammad, just don't see them all as the Muhammad hijabs, Ali Dawas, the various characters, other characters that go down Hyde Park. Most Muslims think Muhammad was the most beautiful, loveliest, sweetest person who ever lived. He's just so... they could cry over him. That's the Muhammad of faith. Or Muhammad of folk faith, I should say. The Muhammad of faith, the strictly speaking doctrinal Muhammad, is the Muhammad of the Hadith and other writings. But the Muhammad of folk faith is the faith of people who are given an expurgated version of Muhammad and honey-coated, right? Sugar-coated. That's what most Muslims think. We must understand that when we think about them. They don't know their religion. So when you make a critical point about Islam, or I make a critical point about Islam, remember, most of the people who are listening to you have that folk Islam, not the Islam of the actual Islamic faith. And by the way, the other thing is the Islam, or the Muhammad of history, the Islam of history, which is just not at all Islam. You know, it just was an evolving religion, only became Islam a couple of centuries after. Oh, you've got lots of stuff by J. Smith, but you can read Gert Pruin and Robert Spencer and others like that to understand that the archaeology is against the Islamic version of its history. And our holy fathers, like St. John of Damascus, who was in the court of Muawiyah, I think. Not speaking of Islam. Speaking of Ishmaelites. Anyway, the point is, most people in their religions, and most Protestants don't know Protestantism, most Christians don't know Christianity, most Muslims don't know Islam, and most Catholics don't know Catholicism. And the point about this is that I have to say a Catholic, on average, if he starts spending time with Christian Prince, and there are these little asides, then he may absorb, without realising it, things which are not of the faith. And he may leave the faith without knowing it until he realises, oh gosh, yeah, there's no need for a priesthood, there's no need for a pope. I think I'll stop going to Catholic Church. That's going to be a very common way people leave the faith, who start out with an actual belief, a cradle Catholic belief. And so, we as Catholics, we see Jesus established church, the priesthood, the perfect institution he established, the Catholic faith. The priests are there. First you get the bishops, the successors of the apostles. They possess a diocese. A diocese is simply a Roman jurisdictional form. But the point is, the territory of the earth has to be divided up in some physical way. And so in a diocese, there's a bishop. Every diocese has a bishop. And he's the shepherd of the sheep. But he can't run it all himself, so he has priests who are like his hands, and the diocese is divided up into parishes. And the priest who heads each parish, he's the shepherd effectively for that parish, for that geographical zone. And this is to be a god. It's not just a dispenser of the sacraments, he's to be a guardian of the faithful and the faith. Why? Why not just be a dispenser of the sacraments? Why not just be a preacher? Why be a guardian? What's this guardian business? Well, it's in the very nature of shepherd. Why do you have shepherds in the countryside? Because the countryside has ravening wild beasts all over it. Maybe we've killed all our wolves and bears in England, but generally the countryside has wild animals. Of course, in England now it's full of foxes. So, your duty as a shepherd is to guard your sheep. And Jesus, of course, as you know, born-again Christians, as well as us brother Catholics, he lays down his life for his sheep. He's not like a hireling shepherd who'll run away. He'll put himself between the wolf and the sheep. And this means that we must recognise ourselves as vulnerable. And we must recognise there are weaker members amongst ourselves. I speak to Catholics now. And we must realise that most of us Catholic sheep are extremely weak and sickly. In the readings for the Divine Office, the Office of Readings, this week and last week, some readings from St. Augustine, talking about the duty of the shepherd. As St. Augustine, that the Protestants admire him, was a Roman Catholic bishop. Just remember that. All right, so we are sheep, and we therefore must say that we can't say it to the sheep, oh, you go there, you can go there, everything will be all right. Go and graze over there, go and graze over there. There's no problem. No. There are wolves everywhere. We must say, stay in the sheepfold, stay in the Catholic sheepfold. Now, you can have, if you have a trustworthy person who's not in the sheepfold, something like Christian Prince seemed to be, who offers something which is not to be found easily in the sheepfold, go there, graze there for a while, but under supervision. Never stay out there long, come back to the sheepfold to be fed the full spectrum of the faith. But if outside of the sheepfold, it turns out that where you're grazing there is actually a person who is a wolf. He might not be a wolf now. He may be a werewolf who appears to be a man, but actually has this dark side. But he may just be curable. So his werewolf status could be brought to an end and he becomes a man again. You can graze there at safe times, but if it's dangerous, if there's a real wolf there or a werewolf, stay away, stay away. At this moment in time, Christian Prince is a wolf of some sort. For Catholics, he's not a wolf absolutely, because he's bringing people, I have to remind people of this, he's bringing people out of the darkness of Islamism into 90% Catholicism. He doesn't see it as 90% Catholicism, but it is. He probably doesn't know the history of the Reformation. And again, that's not criticism. It just seems to be the case. So he probably doesn't, because of the things he's focused on, the things he's speaking about. But he's really somebody that only non-Catholics, probably Protestants, can patronise at the moment. Because Catholics are going to imbibe something which makes all the work against Islam worthless. Because if you leave the Catholic faith, because for somebody who's doing great work in bringing people out of Islam, you've achieved nothing. You yourself will be damned, potentially. Potentially, not actually. I've given reasons why you can't say it's actually at any moment in time until the last moment of life. But you cannot endanger your own salvation. Fortunately, though, there are men like David Wood, who I don't watch these people all the time, any more than I watch Christian Prince all the time, but I've not heard David Wood be overtly critical of us. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. He'd fall into the category of Christian Prince if so. But Sam Shamoun is obviously a candidate to get fed by. He's within the sheepfold. It seems, it's a bit of a grey area here. I'm not sure whether he's a Catholic or Orthodox, but nonetheless, he's pretty much safe within the sheepfold. And so we can be fed by what he says. It's safe. And if one day, thanks be to God, let's hope so, there is that coming together of Christian Prince and Sam Shamoun and others, perhaps by the mediation of others, makes Christian Prince either ideally become a Catholic and therefore sort out all this stuff in his head, or at the very least he goes back to what he seemed to be for years, just being a Protestant, but hardly ever making a case about Catholic. In fact, he'd only talk about, we don't need a priest, don't need the Pope, when he had a Muslim who'd come out of Islam and was looking to become a Christian. You see, then you could say that from a Protestant perspective. It's understandable. He doesn't know more than that. And since he'd done such great work in bringing that person out of darkness, I can hardly quibble over his enunciating Protestantism, his promoting Protestantism. So that's what I see about the position of Christian Prince right now. I hope one day we can just go back and watch him and learn from him. Because maybe Sam Shamoun feels he can't learn anything from him, but I'm not him, and many of you guys are not him. He's at another level of understanding and knowledge, but I'm not. So I'd love to be able to, say, yeah, Catholics, watch this guy, Christian Prince. He really is, a trustworthy Protestant. But for now, I can't. So you might say, well, okay, he did say what he said. I'm gonna end this video very, very soon. But you might think, well, what are you Catholics doing about Islam? What are you Catholics doing? My oh my, After all, this all started off with the Pope, didn't it? Perhaps I should write a letter to Francis and say, look, you don't know what you've done. Because he'll be thinking, oh gosh, they're having a go at me, He doesn't know what's going on here, does he? Not a clue. 88 years old, bless him. I know it's a serious business, but again, you don't want to give yourself heart attacks, my fellow Catholics and my Protestant friends. Francis is what Francis is. Jesus will sort it out. Why am I so easygoing? Because the Catholic faith is established by Christ, and he knew this was going to happen. We're at the end times, folks. Lightning struck the Vatican hours after Pope Benedict resigned. Twice, and once it was caught on camera. Monsignor Georg Ganswein, the assistant to the Pope, aide de camp or whatever it would be called. It would be called that, of course. But he said the whole cupola shook when lightning struck. Hours after Benedict resigned. It was the 13th day of year 13 of month 3, 2013, that Francis became Pope. Hey, let's not do numerology. I just can't help myself. Look, things are strange in the Catholic Church. They've been building up to being strange since the 1960s, and there's a lot could be said about that. But we've reached what would be the equivalent of peak oil. Peak trouble, I'll say that. But we may not have reached peak trouble yet. But the world's going funny. It's going funny in terms of this build up towards nuclear conflict. And we've got to say, if you've got this thing about Francis, if we're in the end times, it's been prophesied by Catholics that there's going to be a problem in Rome, a problem at the end times. But that doesn't mean the Catholic Church is false. It means it's the true church, but Satan will achieve something within it. All the other churches are still false or schismatic. Doesn't make them true just because bad stuff is happening in the Catholic Church. Doesn't mean the Catholic Church is false just because bad stuff is happening in it. If you cut an apple open and there's a worm in it, the apple is still an apple. The worm could have rotted away much of the apple. The apple is still an apple. It's a rotten apple, but it is the apple. There's no other apple. You think you can pick apples from the apple tree? No, this is the apple created by God. This is the divine apple. But divine apple. Because there is a divine and human aspect to the Catholic Church. Best know that, otherwise you'd be in total confusion as to why I say it's the true church with all the bad stuff that's gone on. Oh, by the way, more good stuff, more great stuff than any other organisation on earth, Protestant or otherwise. Eastern Orthodox, heathen, pagan, doesn't matter. This is the light to the nations for 2,000 years. So get that as the context. But nonetheless, we have the apple. The only apple Jesus gave us to eat. That apple is the counterpoint, the opposite of the apple that Eve ate in disobedience and Adam ate in disobedience. This is the gift, what we call the universal sacrament of salvation. So then, nonetheless, it's all right me going in all this fluffy stuff, isn't it? Christian Prince is getting the Muslims out of Islam. What are the Catholics doing? We knew bad stuff, you might say. Last week, bad stuff. Giving the Muslims the idea that that their religion is a way to salvation. Okay, here's an example.